There are 47 steps right now to lease a unit. And so if we can reduce the amount of work that our leasing agents are doing, um, to a manageable amount of work that really a lot of it can be done back room, a lot of it can be done through AI, so that then they become the voice and the person that delivers this great resident experience to that prospective resident. We all win, right? The prospective resident didn't spend a ton of time shifting, and we do everything digitally now, but there's still a lot that has to happen between the resident and our team. So, that leasing agent is invaluable. We know that people rent from people. The building has to look good. The unit has to look good. But ultimately, you and I know we buy cars from people we like. We go to restaurants where the service is great. It's no different in our industry. So let's give them the time to really focus on that resident and let all the rest of that be done back room through AI and other tools.
Quick favor before we jump in. It always surprised me that a large percentage of people who listen to this show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you're a commercial real estate operator, investor, or builder who values conversations like this around deals, capital, and technology, please take 2 seconds and hit subscribe. It's a simple, free way to support the show. My commitment to you is that my team and I will continue bringing you higher level operators, stronger conversations, and real execution level insights every single week. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast. I'm Luis Fernandez, and this show is for operators, the people who actually running portfolios, teams, capital stacks, and real decisions in real markets. Today's guest is Arleen Garza, founder of REEP Equity and REEP Residential. She has built a vertically integrated multifamily platform across Texas, overseeing more than $650 million in assets, combining acquisitions, asset management, and in-house property management under one disciplined structure. This episode isn't about theory. It's about how real operators protect NOI, scale teams, and make high-stakes decisions when markets tighten and margins compress. Arleen, glad to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Louis. If I look back, I never thought I'd be using AI and operations in the same breath. But, our industry, what we call prop tech, has been way behind. And so it's refreshing to see everything that is being brought forward. However, now the issue becomes, which ones do you pick? What do you develop in-house? How do you use it to remove friction? The friction of an ever evolving, especially on the operations side, work and costs behind it. So excited to have this chat with you today.
This is fantastic. The first question I have, and I always ask, is when someone asks you, what do you do, Arleen? How do you answer that?
Everything. No, I really don't. I delegate quite a bit to a fantastic team. But within our company, we have the equity arm, which is the buying and selling arm of our business, the capital raising arm, the capital markets arm, basically procuring the right debt. And then we have REEP Residential, which is our in-house vertically integrated management company. And then we have REEP Development, our newest entity, which is developing our first ground up development project. With all of this, we have just under 200 folks on our team that are committed to our mission of providing good housing to the residents that call a REEP property home.
That's beautiful. What is the market forcing disciplined operators to do differently right now?
Well, I think for us, it's, not just about competition, because of late, the last 2 years, transaction volumes have been low, but it's the complexity and the focus really on operations. We've been saying that now for 5 years. We used to say it was the decade of operations. Well, we're starting this new real estate cycle with a focus on operations. Texas in particular, which is where we own and manage, only in Texas, has really seen a lot of new supply. So with all those units being delivered, impacts rent growth, impacts occupancy, et cetera. A big focus has been, how do you reduce operational cost? How do you increase the retention of your residents so that you can still hit that NOI or get as close to that NOI as you can. So I think it's a welcoming thing to see all the AI tools. In fact, we have 23 in our tech stack, which we're whittling down to really look at the ones that are the most effective. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of operators. I must get 10 to 15 emails a day from a new AI based company offering a new tool. And so, how do you segment them? How do you vet them? How do you figure out which one is the right tool for you versus creating your own? And so, my partner, husband, Jacob, had a property management software company that he started really right after we married. And so, he's got a technology background. So, he's doing some work with his chief technology officer from the past and already putting together some proprietary AI tools that will integrate with our property management system. As an example, reports. We have 24 assets that we produce monthly reports for our investors for. That process was a week and a half to 2 weeks for our asset management team to produce and send through the investor portal. That's now down to 2 hours. And that's through
Incredible.
our own proprietary work. And so now we're looking at how do we expand that into other areas with the ultimate goal being streamlining the effectiveness of our team, right? Ultimately, you want them focused on taking care of that resident that carries our paychecks in their pockets. And so if you take care of the resident, everything else takes care of itself. So a lot of work that we're doing both in-house and vetting what's available today until we develop our own.
Amazing. You had a great point there. How do you know which tech stack or which AI tools are really right for you? So, how do you evaluate that? How do you determine?
I call it decision literacy, using data and information we're able to cull through to determine, is this really going to be effective for what we're doing? Is it going to add more work? Initially, I think you've got a little more work because you're defining processes, right? Workflows and determining where does this fit within that workflow. But I think in the long run, it will be easier for us to say this one has more to it than just this one small piece of what we need solved. And so it's always been about solving problems. And the biggest question is, does this solve a problem or fix a workflow? And I'll speak to, leasing units. There are 47 steps right now to lease a unit. And so if we can reduce the amount of work that our leasing agents are doing, um, to a manageable amount of work that really a lot of it can be done backroom, a lot of it can be done through AI, so that then they become the voice and the person that delivers this great resident experience to that prospective resident. We all win, right? The prospective resident didn't spend a ton of time shifting, and we do everything digitally now. But there's still a lot that has to happen between the resident and our team. So, that leasing agent is invaluable. We know that people rent from people. The building has to look good. The unit has to look good. But ultimately, you and I know we buy cars from people we like. We go to restaurants where the service is great. It's no different in our industry. So let's give them the time to really focus on that resident and let all the rest of that be done back room through AI and other tools.
Love it, Arlene. What are you seeing weaker operators struggle with the most right now?
I think one of the biggest struggles is, occupancy and operationally the maintenance side of things. We're in workforce housing, so a lot of what we buy are, 80s to early 2000s assets. So you may have a little more deferred maintenance. You might have a little bit more of that to work through. We have a maintenance team, let's call it 3 on a 250 unit property. And so once their work orders get to a certain point, it becomes frustrating, right, for everybody. So we actually have used a program that is not our proprietary one, but it does things like our maintenance shops, right? We organize the maintenance shops so that one, they know what supplies they already have. You can probably count the number of times somebody has to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or another supplier to obtain these items. Well, if they don't know if they have it or not, then they're making a trip maybe for nothing, right? So it's costing time and money. And are we getting the best price on that? Those materials they're purchasing because they're buying them not at our contracted vendor price. They're buying them on the spot price. So if they don't have to do that, that's one piece of it. If they don't have to go back and forth with a work order, they can do it all on their phone or a tablet or something where they're not having to go back to the office and submit a handwritten ticket to say it was completed. That again is a time saver. And the number one reason people move from a property to another one is service. It's, did my toilet get fixed? Did that leaky faucet get fixed? So solving that piece of it also helps us improve our retention. And today, most operators are focused on retention, keeping what you have, because it's going to cost you more to bring something new, both from a marketing standpoint, from a time standpoint, et cetera. So retention has become one of the biggest things that operators are focused on today. So how does your team help that retention? How do they become part of that solution? And then how does AI and other tools help that process also? As I said, if they're not having to leave for 30 minutes to go pick up a part to something because we already have our list of 100 top used parts. Our system will automatically submit an order for those items when they're running below a certain inventory level. And so those are the types of things. And that's just beginning to crack the surface. It really is. At some point, will we have robots doing this? I don't know. People still want people to take care of them. And so we're keeping that in mind. It's just how do we help our people be more efficient?
Where are you personally more conservative today than you were 2 years ago?
In our underwriting. I think, I head up our acquisitions and through our team, and you've got to use the data to help you make those decisions. We always have. The beauty is we not only have external data from the sources that everybody uses, but we have our team feeding us data every week on pricing, rents, fees, et cetera. They're shopping their competition to know how do we stack up against them. And the issue is, how do you use that data to make decisions when we're buying? It might be a property that is in the same submarket as two other assets. Well, we know where rents are today. We know where occupancy is today. So if we receive a T12 or a 12-month operating statement from an operator that doesn't fit that mold, we're probably going to ask more questions. We're going to look at that rent roll a little closer. We're going to underwrite the last 30 leases to see, are those rents going up, down, or somewhere in between? Because that's going to really give us the data to know how we're going to underwrite a new asset in that market. So data is king for us. We're big on data-driven decisions. That's not changing. It's just going to be enhanced as we have access to more and faster information.
Amazing, Marlene. So let's talk a little bit about why vertical integration. You choose to vertically integrate instead of outsourcing management. What problem were you solving when you made that decision?
Control. And I will tell you that there was when we were about 500 units, somebody advised us to really look at third-party management because they said you're working so hard in your business, you're not necessarily working as hard on your business. So we took that advice and we shifted our properties to a third-party manager. And don't get me wrong, there's some excellent third-party companies out there. This is not a knock against anyone. I will just share my experience. And my experience was, you received your financial statements 20 to 30 days after the end of the month. If they're providing you monthly reporting, which I hope everybody's getting that. As you looked back on it, or as I looked back on it, I have a banking background, right? So very in tune to the numbers and a finance degree. So again, numbers drive a lot of who I am. So as I would look at the reports, I generate a 2-page email to the company managing the property asking questions. Things like, who is this person on my payroll? I only have 2 maintenance guys, but I showed 3 that I'm being charged for. Who is this person? Things like, I would get a $6,500 charge for new pool furniture. And I would send an email saying, last time I drove by the property, we did not have any new pool furniture. So where is this? Is it coming? What? And where is this furniture? And why is my property getting the charge? And the response was, oh, we made a mistake. It should have been, charged to a different property. And so I found that I was spending more time responding to things that I saw on the general ledgers that it didn't really save me time. So, and if occupancy dipped in that month, it's too late to fix it because I didn't know about it until into the next month. And so for me, I just found that the way I think, the way I work is again, data, information, and I couldn't wait that long to receive it and then not be able to react to it. So when we hit about 1,000 units, we said we're going to bring them back in house. We're going to hire a team. And that's key. Tell anybody considering it. You have to hire a team. You have to invest in people. You try to do it all yourself. One, it's impossible. And two, you're not going to be as effective as hiring professionals that know what they're doing. So we hired a team, brought the properties back in house, and started operating them. Now, I will also say when you're shifting from third party to bringing it in house, there's certain things you really need to look at, right? Where's your AP? Do you have proof of payment for those invoices that were paid? Because unfortunately, sometimes those vendors realize that there's a change in management and invoices appear. And then you've got an audit trail that you got to follow. So there's a lot to switching. And I'll say if you're gonna switch, get a checklist before you switch to a company and make sure that you have all the information you need to take it from that point forward.
At scale, where does real alignment look like between acquisitions, asset management, and on site operators?
Okay. I think for us, as I said, when we hit 1,000 units, it was time. They say that's about the right number. You can do it with less. I've seen folks really manage, 20, 30, 50 units. It's just a lot of time going into it. But for me, asset management is key because your asset manager is managing your managers. Even though we do it in house, you want that checks and balances. You want that person that's saying the trend looks like this. Let's make sure that the operation side of our house sees the trends. They can react to the trends today. For example, leasing. If we know we have a high number of expirations of leases in 60 days, they should have sent that renewal notice 30 days before now, right? And they should be working those renewals and getting those folks to commit before. If you wait to 30 days before their lease expires, they've already made a decision. It's too late to influence that decision. So the asset management team and the operations team work hand in hand. And we do everything in house except for roofs and foundations. Those require specialized skills, an engineer. They require equipment that we don't want to have for that occasional need that you may have. And so everything else we do in house and on the capital project side, it's important. We raise money on the front end when we buy these assets so that we can improve the value of the asset. And if you're into an asset 2 years later and you haven't deployed it, that money has sat there without producing you results, without producing the ROI that you want. So our capital projects team, the day we do due diligence on a new asset, we walk away with bids from our vendors and a true budget. Now, will things shift? Sometimes, but at least what we know is that we have the right vendor. Vendor relationships are key. We've established them. We are loyal to them and they produce the right product at the right price. And so those are key.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about NOI truth, what actually moves the performance. So let's talk unit economics.
Okay.
If you ranked the top levers that move NOI the most, what are they in order?
Rent growth, other income growth. And of course, you've got your negatives you got to watch, right? Bad debt, concessions. You've got to watch all of those levers so that they don't reduce the income that you work so hard to produce. So to me, those are key. And then you've got on the operational side, your big three: payroll, taxes, and insurance. And the rest of them are somewhat controllable. Those are very uncontrollable. In Texas, we don't have a state income tax. So the state revenue and the municipalities rely on property taxes. So every year we are protesting our property taxes through a nationally recognized firm. And then we have an attorney that files on a flat fee basis litigation. So if we don't get the number we want on the front end, then he files the litigation and then works directly with our tax protest team to get us the best results. Every single year, we've had savings, big savings for our assets. On the insurance side, boy, it was tough 3 years ago. Insurance went up, call it 20 to 30%. And we buy lots of insurance. We want to buy lots of insurance. We want to protect our properties. We want to protect the lender. We want to protect our investors and ourselves. So 2 years ago, I made the decision through our broker recommendation to go to London and talk directly to Lloyd's of London underwriters. And the experience was good. It was all business. I wish I could say I toured London and the UK. I didn't. I was there for business. But what I learned is that these underwriters said that they get hundreds of requests from property owners in the US, in particular in Texas, to have them provide insurance. And Lloyd's is 6 billion or more. Today, they're the biggest insurers in the world. And what we did was we went in and we shared how we run our business. And how does that impact them? It reduces their exposure. We talked about things like the two big freezes we had in Texas. We had zero claims. And there were some owners that had massive claims. But the reason we didn't is because we sent notices to our residents to raise the heat in their units, made sure that the heat was on in vacant units. We dripped the water faucets. We covered the external pipes. And so those sorts of things meant we didn't create a loss for our insurers. And they like that. And so because of that, 2 years ago, I was able to get a 35% reduction in our insurance program. Last year, 25%. This year, we're hoping for even more savings. But on a $100 million insurance program, those are real dollars. So, people say, well, couldn't you just have sent your broker? I could, but he can't sit in front of them and talk about how I run my properties. And so it was, I think, in learning for me about every dollar I spend, it's more effort, right? It's more effort to take the time to do that. But it makes a huge difference for our assets and for our investors all across the board. So from the expense side, watch your payroll, watch your taxes, watch your insurance, and influence those as much as you can, because those are real dollars that can impact that. And then I go back to retention. I can't stress that enough. It will cost us, call it anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000 to a standard turn on a unit. Go in and paint it. Go in and, if the countertops are resurfaced, go in and do that. If there's damage to the flooring, to fix that. Paint the doors. The doors always get, something happen to them because they get a lot of use. So if we can save, call it average $3,500 by not having to replace a tenant in the unit, those are real dollars. And so I think that's a big impact to your NOI. And you're not having to spend the marketing dollars to get somebody new in the door to replace that tenant that left. So retention starts with our maintenance teams taking care of the residents' needs. So it's all people. Every bit of it is people.
Retention is the key. I love it.
It is. Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Where do owners misdiagnose performance issues? Is it usually rents or operations or staffing or execution discipline?
I think a lot of it has to do with your staffing. The regional manager is key. Now, your community manager, your community director, think about that they are running multi-million-dollar businesses. Each of these properties is multi-million-dollar business. And one of the things that we've learned is that a lot of times when we hire someone, they don't have the financial literacy behind how that T12 is put together, how the budget is put together, how they influence those numbers. So on an annual basis, and then we do quarterly ongoing training, We do a boot camp, a financial literacy boot camp. We teach these managers how to read these financial statements and how they can impact those. We show them how a 1% change in occupancy impacts that NOI, impacts the bottom line. That is key, is making sure you have a well-trained team and how you, even to the point of how you onboard them. Somebody doesn't show up at one of our assets unless they've shadowed another manager for 2 weeks. One, they learn our systems, they learn our processes. Most of all, they learn our culture and our vision and our mission. They know that our focus is on taking care of that resident. So those things are key on in terms of how successful you're going to be. If it was just about data and numbers, that'd be easy, right? You can watch those, you can monitor those, you can project those, but it's the people driving those numbers that is key. And right now, occupancy is a big one. Occupancy is a big one. And so having that community director that motivates the team to lease to the right folks. And I will tell you, one of the biggest things we have found over the last year is the amount of fraud that exists in our industry has grown. And why is that? Well, AI, internet. You can buy a pretty good looking pay stub and pretty good looking fake ID on the internet. And so some folks that were maybe evicted after the pandemic who didn't take the government assistance, who weren't proactive, now have a harder time renting a unit. We used 3 different AI tools, talking about AI, to enhance our screening. So our property management software does one level of screening, and then we added 3 more on top of that. Within the first month of testing it on 3 assets, we had a 25% increase in the declines of new lease applications due to fraudulent documentation. So that's a real thing you have to pay attention to. Who becomes a resident at your property matters. 1, are they going to pay you? 2, are they going to take care of the asset? And 2, are they going to be the type of citizen resident that you want at your property? So that's important. Again, another way to use an AI tool to improve the income at your property by not having bad debt go up, right? Bad debt goes up when you have someone who isn't going to pay you. And sometimes you run into folks who want to treat it like a hotel. I'll live there for a month until they figure out that I can't pay, and then they'll have to spend another month kicking me out. So all of that is important. And every state has different rules. Luckily, Texas is very landlord friendly. And so our legal process is much quicker than in some states. And that's important to know too when you're buying. What are the laws in that state? Are they landlord friendly, or what do you need to prepare for if they're not?
We're up here in the Northeast, and I can assure you, Arleen, we are not landlord friendly up here. And to be honest with you, I don't even purchase in my local market,
Mm,
which is here in the Northeast. I purchase in Texas and Florida and some of the more landlord friendly states.
yeah, yeah.
Talk
Makes
a little,
sense.
let's talk a little bit about process friction, where scale creates stress. So at 5,000 plus units, where does information break first, Arleen?
Well, for us, I think it is the data we get from the properties. That's where it can break. So all of our managers have to submit a market survey weekly into our asset management team. That data is used for us to do our pricing, for us to determine again what, even down to the unit level, how many units of this particular type are vacant. Why is that? Why it's maybe of the 2 bedrooms more are vacant 2 bedrooms in one property than another property. Well, it's a lot of times the makeup of the demographic. If you're in an area with a lot of single people, they may not need a 2 bedroom unless you're near a college or something where they want a roommate situation. So I think it's the data from the assets for us, ensuring that when we get it on time and that it matches up with external data, right? So we're reviewing that data that we get from the properties on the rents against what RealPage or Smart Data or one of these other sources that we utilize tells us they are. If there's a big disconnect, then the question is, why is there a disconnect? Is it that RealPage runs or apartments.com report 30 days or 60 days after an event? Then that tells us our data is more accurate and more reliable. So our pricing will be based on that information. So it's, as I said in the beginning, or when you asked me, what is the biggest impact to NOI? Rent and rent growth. So having the data to know if your pricing is as optimal or as competitive as it can be is important.
What's the hardest operating process to standardize across your portfolio?
It's on the maintenance side. There's so many different pieces to what they do. Every day it could be, in Texas, we're getting close to HVAC season where those units need to be serviced and or maintained. So preventative maintenance is important, huge. Even things like filters in the units, changing the air filters in the units, not only from a resident air quality standpoint, but just in general to keep that unit, that HVAC unit working better. So I think the maintenance side is the most fun, labor intensive, but two, more pieces to the workflows and the processes. So that's an area we will tackle and have tackled, frankly, through external AI tools. But I think even then it can become more efficient. And imagine how happy we make our maintenance teams if we can fix some of those things for them and make it better. We focus a lot on quality of life for them also. Summertime, each of the maintenance teams get a cooling kit. Their vest, some vests that have ice packs in them, cooling. So they each get a little thing for their head. So if they're out, it's like an umbrella. If they're out, and then they get a big umbrella that goes on a stand. They have water stations with cold water. They have all of these things that we provide for them so that they can also be effective and stay comfortable in the Texas heat.
They're the key. So we got to take
They
care
are.
of the core of our success, right?
Yeah, that is true.
What's the most reoccurring friction point you deal with today?
Probably that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably that. I mean, it really is. It is because there's so many things, as I said, that they work on that break on a daily basis, right? Those are the that's the friction point that I think makes the it requires us to look at more. How do we get into predictive maintenance? What does that look like? That's a goal. On the lease side, what is the impact to the leases? How do we make that process faster? Ultimately, you got to be a marketing company. People don't look at our industry as that, but we are in the sales business. We are marketing homes to people. And so, how do we use AI on that front? Well, you look at Google ads, you look at Facebook ads, you look at all of the ways that consumers shop. Your ratings, your Google ratings are important. So we're using AI for reputation management. So if there is some resident who posts something that says, you know what, my toilet didn't get fixed for a week, I'm so upset, somebody responds to that within 24 hours. Because if you don't, that already sets in their mind, I'm not renewing here. They didn't even care to respond to my request or to respond to my concern. So those are the things that I think we really are looking at a lot. And as I said, marketing, don't forget that piece of it because that is really key to the business.
I love it, Arlene. Let's talk a little bit about how you run the machine. I'm very interested in knowing, right? So, walk me through your weekly operating cadence. What meetings cannot be skipped?
Well, on Mondays, we do have an acquisition meeting, right? We have a team huddle. So we're huddling to say, okay, guys, what is our goal for this week? What are our goals for the week? What do we need from each other to accomplish that? And then we have an acquisitions meeting where we're looking at all the deals we're underwriting. Growth. It's about growth too. If you're not buying, you're not growing. Now, for us, it's always been about measured growth. We never want to saddle our team with more than they can do because you don't want a negative experience for the new residents coming into a new building we bought. And you don't want the team to get frustrated. So it's about understanding, okay, what are our goals for this year? If we're going to acquire, call it 8 assets, what does that mean? How many people do we need on the operations side of the house? When do we project we'll be buying them? Therefore, when do we need back up from that? When do we need to be hiring? So we're looping in our HR teams, right? So that they understand that piece of it. And then on Tuesdays, there's asset management, right? What did the properties send in? What does it look like from a pricing standpoint for rents? And then what are the trends showing us? How many expirations do we have? How do we get in front of those? Wednesdays, we have cash flow. That's a big one. I mean, cash is king in this business. You've got to have the cash coming through the door to be able to pay your folks, to pay your vendors, to pay for every bit of it, and the mortgage, a big one, right? So cash flow is very important. And then on Thursday, we're looking at, okay, we're almost through the week. What happened? Right? So it's a summary meeting. Where are we? Did our focus change this week? Did we target some other areas that we need to really focus on? And then Friday, I like to meet back with the team. Did we make any offers this week? What happened with those offers? Is there anything that we need to tell our operations team? Look, this one looks like it might move forward. Sometimes it's sending them to go shop an asset or find out. Many times our team has already managed an asset that we might be looking to buy through a different company when they work for a different company. So we send them out and say, go shop it. Before we make an offer, we want to make sure that it's in the right area and that we can succeed in this submarket. So they go out and they give us feedback. And there have been times when they come back and they say, don't touch it. The numbers might have looked good in what we underwrote, and we're very conservative on that front, but they're saying you're never going to get a good renter in that submarket. You're going to have some challenges. Now, you can get a good renter in any submarket, but you want those areas where you're not really having to struggle to bring somebody from outside of that submarket to rent with you. It doesn't happen. People live where they work and play. And so you've got to work with the demographics and the folks that are in those areas to provide them the best homes you can.
Amazing. Are you only in San Antonio?
San Antonio, Houston, Austin, and we are shopping in Dallas Fort Worth right now. Haven't pulled the trigger on anything, but that's another market we like. And for us, those top 4 metros in Texas are in the top 10% population growth cities in the nation. So there's no reason for us to go shopping anywhere else, not when we've got those great opportunities in our markets. You look at Houston, 7.5 million people in that market. A lot of units, and so there are a lot more trades, it's a lot more activity there, just like Dallas-Fort Worth. San Antonio's a smaller market, yet has less competition typically, so maybe I shouldn't say that. We'll get more people coming in. And then, of course, Austin has had a lot of new supply, so that market is evolving, but there are still opportunities, we believe. And in the space we're in, workforce housing, we're not competing with those Class A properties they're delivering. Not head to head. Yes, it does impact, occupancies and concessions across the market, but our, Class B assets, those renters can't afford the rents that those Class A luxury properties are charging of 3,000 plus. So we can play in all those spaces. We're just very selective in the submarkets that we are targeting.
So Class B, do you do Class C at all?
No, we started out with Class C. I think everybody does, right? It's what you can buy and people will lend you and, et cetera. Our, first one we bought was a small 24 unit. We decided to manage it ourselves, a Class C property in a B area. So it's good. Just the age of the asset. The owner was out of state owner. And just to give you an example, when we showed up, he pulled up in his truck, opened this big suitcase, put it on the hood of the car, and there were a bunch of papers jumbled in there. And he said, there's all your leases, there's all your financial information. So we basically had to create the financials from all of that documentation. So we learned a lot, but the property had good bones. So we, figured out how to run a property from that small one and then just grew from there to now where we are.
Beautiful. Do you have a minimum as far as how many units and a maximum of what's the sweet spot?
Yeah, for us, it's typically 150 to 300. We have bought smaller, but more of your townhome communities where the rents equate to a much bigger size property just because the townhome units generate a much higher rent. And actually, we love that product. That's what we're developing in the San Antonio area because it does meet the need for those millennials and Gen Z renters who want to live in a home, more of a home than somebody living above them or below them. They want a garage, they want a small yard. And so that product meets the needs. And we found that they're stickier. Those renters are stickier. Our average retention for those properties that we own that are townhome is around 75%. compared to kind of the industry average of 50%. And we found that expense-wise, they've been cheaper to run because a lot of times they're renting off of Zillow or one of the sites. And so we like that product, which is why we're building it. In fact, I read a stat the other day that it used to be millennials said they were going to buy their first home at the age of 30. That number is now 40, the age of 40, if they're going to buy. And then there was another survey that said only about 30% of them saw themselves buying a house. So we've got two big renter groups that are going to continue and have continued to drive demand for us in our markets. And we're thankful to have those two renter groups. They're good. They're good for our industry.
Beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about AI, systems, and leverage. Arleen, I'm not interested in tech hype. What I care about is discipline leverage, removing manual load without breaking trust. Where do you still see high labor, repetitive process inside of your platform?
For us, it's those two that I talked about, leasing and maintenance. Those are the two big ones. And they also are the two biggest that touch our residents. So as far as interactions on a day-to-day basis, so I think those are the two areas where we focused a lot. But we're using it across the board from acquisitions to investor relations, as I talked about with the reporting, marketing and branding. We're using it to get us more effective, ads out there. Screening, I talked about that. We're using it for internal models and pricing on our rents, all of that. Collections. We now use it for collections, several tools that instead of our team sending the emails, sending the text, calling the residents, the AI tool does that for us. So does two things. One, there's less friction between the resident and our team because they're getting this from a third party, but it has resulted in higher collections. So a big one there. And as I said, resident retention, they can reach out to us multiple ways. They don't have to wait for the office to be open to be able to communicate with us. Reputation management, we've got that where it's responding to any concerns folks have. Asset management everywhere, and asset management, we are using it. As I said, we have 23 different tools in our tech stack that are helping us be effective. And accounting and cost analysis. Don't forget the numbers, people, because you want accurate reporting. You want accurate cost analysis. If you were to sit in and be a fly on the wall in our cash flow meetings with our accounting team, you would see where all that data is really helping us to make great decisions, even from, hey, this property has a higher than normal water bill. What has happened there? Has the team isolated a leak, or where are we with all that? I mean, every bit of that. That's just how detailed and involved we are. And my husband and or I visit our properties quarterly. Our asset management team is there monthly. Our property sites teams are there daily, but we like to put our eyes on the asset because it allows us to really say we know what's happening. It's that control thing I talked about in the beginning.
Amazing. From an investor standpoint, where does communication get complex when operational reality isn't that simple?
Well, I think for us is we provide really robust reporting, very robust reporting. And that's not something we're going to deviate away from. And what we find is that most of our investors rarely reach out to us because we do provide that great reporting. We have over 2,200 active investors. We utilize an investor portal so that it's convenient to them. Again, doing the same thing we do with our residents is making it convenient. And we have an investor relations team. So if they want to reach out to someone, they know who to reach out to. And if they want to talk to us, we're also available. It is about being transparent, and it's about having open lines of communication with our investors. And, it's been a tough 2 years where, these properties it's been a challenge. And so it's keeping them informed. I'll tell you, I think back to the pandemic when nobody knew what was going to happen, right? Are people going to pay their rent? What's going to happen? Everybody's shuttered behind doors. What is going to happen? And for us, we never closed our doors. We taught our people how to safely provide good service to our residents. And that taught us a lot. Our income, our NOI grew by 10% during the pandemic. And that's because we were focused. So you can't ever take your eye off the ball. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You've got to find a solution to each and everything. And at that time, we were providing weekly updates to our investors via a video message that my husband and I recorded. This is what we're seeing. This is how occupancy is doing. This is how collections is doing. Because we wanted them to know what we knew, not to have to wait and not to have to wonder what's happening.
That's beautiful. I've had a previous guest that talked about communication being the number one reason that people had mistrust. So
It
having that
is.
communication is beautiful.
It is. And, building that trust is hard with anything you do. So once you build it, work as hard as you can to retain that relationship and that trust and openness with your investors and with your team. We do the same thing with our team. We bring them all into San Antonio 3 times a year. We share the vision. We tell them what we're buying, why we're buying it, what we're doing operationally to improve their standards and processes. And they appreciate it. I mean, I've had, uh, you know, an individual on the maintenance team say he worked for a big hotel chain for 22 years. He said, I was never invited to a meeting like this. He said, the owners never greeted me. He said, you greet me by name. He said, so I will give you 150% of my effort because you value and respect me. That's important.
And how did you build that culture? That's amazing.
One employee at a time or one team member at a time. I like to tell them they're our ambassadors. They're our culture ambassadors. And a lot of it is knowing who you want to hire to bring into that culture because they're going to either foster the same culture or they're not. And so one of the things I like to tell people when we hire them is if you ask somebody for help on something you don't know and they tell you no, I want to know that. I want to know because that is not the spirit of what we want to do. We're a team, and the only way we succeed is as a team. And so hiring is key to your culture. It's going to boost it or create you challenges.
Amazing, Arleen. Let's have a little fun and do a little lightning round. Some quick answers. You ready?
Okay, I'll see.
First metric you check every week.
Occupancy.
Most expensive operational mistake you see repeated.
No preventative maintenance.
Hardest role to hire at scale.
Ooh, that leasing agent and that maintenance technician. Those are the top two.
They're tough to hire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the maintenance technician, because our industry is very competitive and you want people that are certified, that have certifications to handle your HVAC and your electrical and your plumbing. And that's tough to hire. Probably the hardest one to hire.
Key to the whole entire operation for sure.
Very key.
A belief about multifamily that most operators underestimate.
They underestimate the value of the resident, I think, in looking at every process that touches that resident, making sure that it truly does create that same level of trust that we just talked about with investors.
They're the core of your success.
Yes.
What does great operator mean in one sentence?
Highly skilled and involved team.
That was beautiful. Arleen, for anyone listening who wants to follow your work or connect with REEP, where's the best place to find you online?
Go to reepequity.com, REEP equity.com. And there's a little button on there how you can contact us and set a call to find out more about what we're doing.
Beautiful. Are you also on LinkedIn?
I am. I can be. Yes, you'll find me Arleen Garza. EEN, ARLEEN. My mom chose to spell it very differently than the norm, which is fine with me.
It's beautiful. Arleen, this was disciplined, grounded, and operator grade. For everyone listening, if you're running assets, managing teams, or protecting NOI in a tightened market, this is the level of thinking required. If you got value from this episode, share it with another owner or operator who cares about execution, not noise. Arleen, appreciate you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Arleen.
Thank you, Louis, for having me.